"Save my sisters first," she begged. The scout cut her last, and never forgot her face. The morning was unusually quiet. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. The small town was still asleep, and the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. But inside a narrow, dim room at the edge of town, the air felt heavy and tense. There was no peace here, only fear. Mara sat on the floor with her sisters, close enough to feel each other's warmth. The room was small and bare, with a thin blanket spread over the floor and a single window covered with old cloth. They had been hiding here for days, moving from place to place, always watching, always listening. Their faces looked tired, but they were trying to keep their spirits alive. Mara was the youngest, but she acted like she was older. She had a steady look in her eyes, as if she had learned to be brave long before she should have. Her sisters were different from her in many ways, but they all shared the same fear. They shared the same secret. They were being hunted. It had started slowly. At first, the scouts were only rumors, stories told in whispers. People said the scouts were a local group of men who believed they had the right to control others. They would search houses, take people, and then disappear. No one knew where they went or what happened to them. Everyone was afraid to talk about it openly. But the rumors turned into real danger when the scouts began to show up in the streets more often. They would walk through the town, looking at people as if they were choosing objects in a market. Their faces were hard and cold, like they felt nothing. The townspeople began to lock their doors earlier, and families stopped walking outside after sunset. It was like the whole town had been trapped in a cage. Mara's sisters had been living in fear for months. They had tried to stay normal, to continue their lives, but the fear followed them everywhere. The scouts did not only take strangers, they took people who were known in the community, and they did not care if the person was young or old, strong or weak. It didn't matter. They believed they had the power to decide who was allowed to live freely. One night, Mara heard a knock at the door. It was a simple knock, but the sound was enough to freeze her blood. She knew instantly who it was. Her heart started beating faster, and she could feel her hands shaking. Her sisters looked at her, their eyes wide with fear. They didn't need words to understand what was happening. Mara stood slowly and walked toward the door. She tried to make her steps calm, as if she was not afraid. She reached for the handle and paused, listening for any sound outside. Then she opened the door. A man stood there. He was tall and dressed in plain clothes, but his posture and his eyes made him look dangerous. He didn't smile. He didn't speak kindly. He looked at Mara as if she was something he could choose. Mara took a deep breath. She tried to sound calm. "Good morning," she said softly. "We are just travelers. We have nothing that belongs to you." The man's eyes moved slowly over the room behind Mara. He saw the sisters sitting on the floor, their faces pale and tense. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. His boots made a heavy sound on the floor. Mara's stomach tightened. She realized this was not just a visit. This was a search. The man looked at each sister, one by one. He did not say a word. His silence was worse than any shout. Mara felt her throat tighten. She knew that if he wanted them, he would take them. He did not care about their lives, their families, or their dreams. Mara swallowed hard and tried to speak again. "Please," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Why?"
"We have nothing. We are not doing anything wrong."
"We just want to go." The man's eyes moved back to Mara. For a moment, his face softened, almost like he was thinking. Mara felt a small hope rise in her chest. Maybe he would leave. Maybe he would let them go. But then the man spoke, and his words were cold. "You are not free to go," he said. "You have been hiding." Mara felt her heart drop. She knew there was no escape now. The man stepped closer, and Mara could see the faint lines around his mouth. He looked tired, but not in a human way. It was the tiredness of someone who believed he had the right to do anything he wanted. Mara's sisters began to stand up. They were trying to look strong, but their eyes were full of fear. They knew what was coming. They knew that if they were taken, they would be separated. They knew they might never see each other again. Mara looked at them and felt a pain so sharp it felt like it was cutting through her chest. She thought about their childhood, their laughter, their shared meals, the stories they used to tell each other. She thought about how they had promised to always stay together. Now that promise was being tested in the worst way. The man reached for the first sister and pulled her toward the door. The sister did not resist. She only looked back at Mara, her eyes full of silent pleading. Mara wanted to run after her. She wanted to stop the man, but she knew she couldn't. She knew the man would hurt her if she tried. The second sister was taken next. She did not cry. She only stood still, her shoulders shaking slightly. Mara felt tears burn in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She did not want the man to see her weakness. She wanted to stay strong for her sisters, even if she felt like she was breaking inside. The third sister was pushed toward the door. She turned her head toward Mara, and for a moment their eyes met. Mara saw something in her sister's face that she would never forget. It was not fear. It was something stronger. It was trust. Mara knew what she had to do. She could not let her sisters be taken alone. She could not let them face the unknown without her. She stepped forward and faced the man. Her voice was steady now, even though her body was shaking. "Save my sisters first," she said. "Take me last, please." The man paused. He looked at Mara like he was surprised by her request. It was as if he was not used to being challenged. Mara felt a small hope again. Maybe he would listen. The man slowly nodded, as if he was granting her a favor. Mara's heart beat faster. She felt a strange mix of relief and dread. She was being spared. But at what cost? The man looked at the sisters again, then at Mara. He seemed to be thinking. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small knife. It was not large, but it looked sharp. Mara felt a cold wave run through her body. The man did not raise the knife in anger. He held it calmly, like a tool. He looked at Mara's wrist and then made a small cut across it. The cut was shallow, but it hurt. Mara felt the sting and then saw a thin line of blood appear. Mara did not scream. She stood still, her jaw tight, trying to hold back her tears. The man's face remained calm. It was a strange moment, because the man looked almost gentle. But the act was cruel. It was a reminder that he was in control. The man stepped back and looked at Mara. "You will remember this," he said quietly. "You will remember me." Then he turned and left the room. The door closed behind him, and the room became quiet again. The silence was heavy. Mara looked down at her wrist. The cut was small, but it felt like a mark on her soul. She wrapped her hand with a piece of cloth and sat down on the floor. Her legs felt weak. Mara's sisters were gone. The room felt empty without them. Mara felt a sudden wave of anger, not just at the man, but at the world that allowed such things to happen. She felt angry at herself for not being able to protect them. She felt angry at the fear that had followed them for so long. But beneath the anger, there was something else. A new feeling. A feeling of determination. Mara realized that she could not stay here. She could not wait for the scouts to come back. She could not let her sisters be taken without trying to save them. She knew that she would have to do something, even if it was dangerous. She thought about the man's face. She thought about the way he had looked at her. She knew he would remember her too. She knew he would never forget her face. Mara stood up slowly, her wrist still burning. She looked around the room one last time. She took a deep breath and stepped out into the morning light. The world outside looked calm, but Mara knew it was not. The danger was still there. The scouts were still out there. But Mara also knew that she had to move. She had to find her sisters. She had to keep her promise. She walked quietly through the town, staying in the shadows, trying not to be seen. Every sound made her jump. Every step felt heavy, but she kept going. She would not let fear stop her. She would not let her sisters be lost, and she would never forget the face of the man who had cut her wrist, or the moment she chose to risk everything for the people she loved. Mara walked through the quiet streets, but she did not feel safe. The town looked normal, but she knew it was not. The people in the houses were awake now, and some of them looked out of their windows, but no one came out to help. They had learned to stay silent. They had learned that speaking up could bring danger. Mara understood why they did not help, but it still made her feel alone. Her wrist was wrapped with cloth, and the small cut still hurt. Every time she moved her hand, she felt the sting. But the pain was not the worst part. The worst part was the thought of her sisters being taken away. She kept seeing their faces in her mind, and it made her feel like her heart was being pulled in pieces. Mara walked toward the edge of town where the roads became less crowded. She needed to find the trail that the scouts had left behind. She had no map, no plan, and no idea where they had taken her sisters. But she had something stronger than any map. She had hope, and she had love for her sisters. That was enough to keep her moving. She knew that the scouts would not take her sisters far in one day. They would move slowly, stopping in safe places along the way. They would try to keep the group together, but they would also try to keep them under control. Mara thought about the way the man had cut her wrist. She realized that the cut was not just a mark. It was a warning. He wanted her to remember him. He wanted her to know that he could find her if he wanted. Mara tried to think like him. She tried to imagine where he would go, what route he would take, and where he would stop. She remembered the direction he had walked when he left her home. She followed that direction, keeping her steps quiet. The road was dusty and empty. The sun was higher now, and the heat began to rise. Mara walked for hours, stopping only when she needed to rest. She did not eat much. She did not drink much. Her body was tired, but her mind was awake and sharp. She kept thinking about her sisters and what they might be feeling. As she walked, she saw small signs of the scouts' passage. A broken branch on the side of the road, a piece of cloth caught on a fence, footprints in the dirt. Each sign made her heart beat faster. She knew she was on the right path, but she also knew that the scouts might be watching. Mara decided to move more carefully. She walked through the shadows of trees and bushes, avoiding open areas. She listened to the sounds around her. She could hear birds, insects, and the distant sound of water. But she also listened for human sounds, for the sound of boots, or a voice, or a horse. After several hours, Mara saw something that made her stop. Ahead of her was a small group of people gathered near a building. They looked like they were waiting for something. Mara could not see their faces clearly, but she could tell that they were not friendly. They stood too close together, and their posture was stiff, like they were ready for trouble. Mara hid behind a tree and watched them carefully. She tried to make out what they were doing. Then she saw it. A small truck parked near the building. It looked like it had been used to carry people. Mara's heart sank. She knew that this was one of the places where the scouts kept people before moving them again. She stayed hidden and waited. She knew that if she approached, she might be seen. If she was seen, she could be caught. She had to be patient. Down, down, down. The group of people began to move. They walked toward the truck, and Mara saw that some of them were being guided by men. She could see the fear in their faces. They looked tired and weak, and they kept their heads down. Mara's stomach tightened. She felt a strong urge to run toward them and help, but she knew that would be dangerous. She watched as the truck began to move. It was going in the same direction she had been walking. Mara knew she had to follow, but she could not do it too openly. She waited until the truck was far enough away, then she started to follow at a distance. The road was not easy to follow. The truck was moving fast, and the dust it kicked up made it hard to see. Mara had to walk quickly, but she also had to stay hidden. She kept to the sides of the road, using trees and bushes as cover. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, watching for any sign of the truck. The sun was beginning to set when Mara saw the truck again. It was stopped near a large building with high walls. The building looked old and abandoned, but it was clearly being used for something. Mara could see people inside through the windows, and she could see the shadows of men moving around. Mara felt a wave of fear. She had found her sisters, but now she was closer to danger than ever before. She knew that if she was discovered, she might be taken too. She could not let that happen. She had to find a way to help her sisters without being caught. Mara looked around the building, trying to find a way in. There was a small gate, but it was locked. There was a wall, but it was too high to climb. She looked for a window or a small opening, but she could not see one. It seemed like the building was designed to keep people inside and keep others out. Mara sat down behind a bush and rested for a moment. She tried to calm her mind. She knew she needed a plan. She could not just rush in without thinking. She needed to be smart. As she rested, she thought about her sisters. She remembered their faces, their laughter, their voices. She thought about the promises they had made to each other. She thought about how they had always been there for each other. She knew she could not give up. Mara decided to wait until night. She knew that at night the guards would be less alert and the shadows would help her move more quietly. She found a hidden spot near the building and waited, watching the lights inside. The night came slowly and the air became cooler. Mara stayed still, her eyes fixed on the building. When it was dark enough, she moved. She walked quietly toward the building, keeping low to the ground. She reached the wall and looked for a weak spot. After a few minutes, she found a small gap near the base of the wall. It was not big, but it was enough for her to squeeze through. Mara crawled through the gap and found herself inside the building. It was dark and quiet. She could hear the sound of people moving in the distance. Her heart beat fast, but she kept moving. She followed the sound of voices, hoping to find her sisters. She moved through the building slowly, trying to avoid being seen. She saw doors, hallways, and rooms, but she could not find her sisters. She began to feel worried. She wondered if she was too late. She wondered if her sisters had been moved again. Mara stopped and listened. She heard a faint sound of someone crying. She followed the sound, moving carefully. The crying grew louder, and Mara's heart beat faster. she knew she was close. Finally, she reached a room where several people were gathered. She could see women sitting on the floor, looking tired and scared. She looked around, trying to find her sisters. Her eyes scanned the room, and then she saw them. Her sisters were sitting together, holding each other's hands. They looked at Mara with wide eyes. For a moment, no one moved. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Mara's sisters tried to stand up, but they were too weak. Mara walked toward them and knelt down. She touched their hands gently and whispered their names. Mara's voice was quiet, but her heart was loud. She told them she had come to bring them home. She told them that she would not leave them. She told them that they were safe now, even though she knew that they were not completely safe yet. Her sisters' faces changed. They looked like they had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Their eyes filled with tears, but this time, the tears were not only from fear, they were also from hope. Mara knew she had to act fast. She had to find a way to get them out of the building. She looked around for an exit, but she could not see one. The building seemed to have only one way in and out, and that was the gate outside. Mara looked at her sisters and whispered, "We have to leave now. We have to be brave." Her sisters nodded. They stood up slowly, holding each other. Mara led them toward the hallway, moving quietly. They reached a door, and Mara opened it carefully. The door led to a small courtyard. Mara's heart beat faster. She knew they were close to being caught. She could hear footsteps in the distance. She knew the guards might come any moment. Mara looked around and saw a small opening in the wall. It was just big enough for one person to pass through at a time. She motioned for her sisters to go first. She wanted them to be safe. Her sisters crawled through the opening, one by one. When the last sister went through, Mara looked back at the building. She knew the scout would remember her face. She knew he would be watching. She knew that the danger was not over. But for the first time since the morning she had been left alone, Mara felt a small spark of hope. She had found her sisters. She had brought them closer to freedom. She had kept her promise. Now, she only needed to get them home. Mara and her sisters moved through the night like shadows. The sky was dark and the moon was hidden behind clouds. The air was cool and quiet, but Mara could feel the danger around them. She kept looking over her shoulder, watching for any sign that someone was following them. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her face calm so her sisters would not panic. The small opening in the wall led them into a narrow path behind the building. It was covered with bushes and tall grass, which made it easier for them to move without being seen. Mara led the way, and her sisters followed closely. They walked slowly because they were tired and weak, but they kept moving because they knew that stopping could mean being caught. Mara's wrist still hurt, but she did not complain. She knew that if she showed weakness, her sisters might lose hope. She tried to keep her thoughts focused on the plan. She needed to get them to a safe place, far from the scouts. They walked for a long time. The night felt endless. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves and the quiet steps of their feet. Mara kept thinking about the building they had escaped from. She thought about the faces of the women inside, the way they looked tired and scared. She wondered how many people were still trapped there. Mara felt a strong sense of responsibility. She knew that her sisters were not the only ones who needed help, but she also knew that she could not save everyone. She could only save the people she loved right now. She had to focus on them, or she would lose everything. As they walked, Mara noticed something in the distance. A faint light was moving slowly among the trees. At first, she thought it was just a firefly or a small lantern, but the light moved in a steady way, like someone walking with a lamp. Mara's heart skipped a beat. She stopped and held up her hand, signaling for her sisters to stop too. They stood still, listening. The light moved closer, and Mara could hear soft footsteps. It was not the sound of the scouts. It was too quiet. It was too careful. Mara felt a strange mix of fear and hope. She did not know who was coming, but she knew she had to be ready. She could not risk being caught again. She also could not risk being found by someone who might not be friendly. The light grew closer, and Mara could finally see a figure moving between the trees. It was a woman carrying a small lantern. She wore simple clothes, and her face was calm. She looked like someone who had been traveling for a long time. Mara stepped forward slowly, keeping her hands visible. She wanted to show that she was not a threat. The woman stopped and looked at Mara and her sisters. Her eyes moved over their faces, and Mara could see that the woman understood what had happened. The woman spoke softly. "Are you the ones who escaped?" Mara nodded. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "Yes, we escaped." "We need help." The woman looked at them for a moment, and then she nodded. "Follow me," she said. "You cannot stay here. It is not safe." Mara felt a wave of relief. She had been so afraid that they would be caught again. The woman seemed kind, and Mara felt like she could trust her. She motioned for her sisters to follow. They walked through the trees, guided by the woman's lantern. The path was narrow and winding, but the woman seemed to know it well. Mara asked her, "Who are you? How do you know this place?" The woman smiled slightly. "My name is Lena," she said. "I have been helping people who are in danger. I know this area. I know where it is safe to go." Mara felt a strong sense of gratitude. She had not expected to find help so soon. She had been alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. She looked at her sisters and saw that they were also beginning to feel more hopeful. They walked for another hour, and the trees began to thin. The path opened into a small clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a small house made of wood and stone. It looked simple, but it felt warm. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the light from the windows made the clearing look safe. Lena led them to the house and opened the door. Inside there was a small room with a table, a few chairs, and a fireplace. The room smelled like warm bread and herbs. There were other people inside, but they were quiet. They looked tired, but they also looked relieved to see Mara and her sisters. Lena introduced Mara to the people inside. "These are friends," she said. "They have been helping others who escaped." One of the women stood up and came forward. She looked older than Mara, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "You are safe here," she said. "You can rest. You can eat."
"We will help you." Mara felt tears in her eyes.
She had not expected to be welcomed so warmly. She looked at her sisters, and they were also crying quietly. The weight of fear that had been on their shoulders for so long began to lift, just a little. Mara sat down at the table, and someone brought her water and bread. She ate slowly, feeling the food in her mouth like a gift. She felt her body relax for the first time in days. Her sisters sat close to her, and they held each other's hands. Lena sat beside Mara and spoke softly. "You are very brave," she said. "But you must rest now. You cannot keep going like this." Mara nodded. She wanted to rest, but her mind was still racing. She kept thinking about the scouts and the man who had cut her wrist. She kept thinking about how he would remember her face. She kept thinking about how he might come looking for them. Lena seemed to understand. She placed her hand on Mara's shoulder and said, "I know you are afraid, but you are not alone now. We will help you." Mara looked around the room. She saw people who had been through similar things. Some were young, like her. Some were older. Some looked like they had been hurt, but they were still alive. Mara realized that she was not the only one who had suffered. She realized that there were many people who had been scared, but who had also found a way to survive. Mara felt a new kind of strength growing inside her. It was not the strength of anger. It was the strength of hope. It was the strength of knowing that she could keep going, even when things were difficult. As the night went on, Mara and her sisters rested. They slept on simple mats on the floor. The house was quiet and the fire burned softly. Mara's mind was still full of thoughts, but she felt calmer. She felt like she had found a place where she could breathe. In the morning, Mara woke up to the sound of birds outside. The sun was rising and the world looked peaceful again. She sat up and looked at her sisters. They were still sleeping, and their faces looked relaxed. Mara felt a small smile on her lips. She walked outside and saw Lena standing near the door, looking at the sky. Lena turned and smiled when she saw Mara. "You are awake?" she said. "Good."
We have much to do today.
Mara felt a little nervous. She did not know what Lena meant. She asked, "What do we need to do?" Lena's expression became serious. "We need to plan your journey home," she said. "You cannot stay here forever. The scouts may still be looking for you. We must move before they find this place." Mara nodded. She knew Lena was right. She wanted to stay, but she also knew that staying could be dangerous. She looked at her sisters and saw that they were waking up. They looked at her with tired eyes, but also with hope. Mara took a deep breath. She knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. She knew that they would have to be careful, but she also knew that she was not alone. She had help now. She had people who cared. Mara looked at Lena and said, "Thank you for helping us. We will do what we need to do." Lena nodded. "We will get you home," she said. "We will make sure you are safe." Mara felt a new sense of determination. She knew that her journey was not over, but she also knew that she was stronger now. She had found hope in the darkness, and she would not let it go. The morning air felt fresh, but Mara did not feel calm. She looked at the small house and the people who had helped them, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. But she also felt a heavy weight in her chest. The danger was still there. The scouts were still out in the world, and they were still searching. Mara knew that they could not stay in one place for long. Lena had already begun to make plans. She had gathered maps, notes, and small supplies. She had also talked to some of the other people who were staying in the house. Mara listened quietly as Lena explained the route they would take. The plan was simple, but it was not easy. They would travel by foot for part of the way, and then they would take a small cart that would be hidden behind a hill. The cart belonged to a friend of Lena's, someone who trusted her. The friend would not be there in person, but the cart would be waiting. The journey would take several days, and they would have to avoid the main roads.
Mara looked at her sisters.
They were listening closely, but their faces showed that they were still tired. Mara knew that they were still scared. She also knew that they had been through a lot. She wanted to protect them, but she also knew that she could not do everything alone. She needed help, and she had found help in Lena and the others. Lena noticed Mara's thoughts and said softly, "You are doing well. You are not alone. We will help you." Mara nodded. She felt a small relief, but she also felt a new kind of fear. She realized that the scouts might not only be looking for her and her sisters, they might also be looking for Lena and the others who helped them. Mara did not want anyone to be hurt because of her. She went to Lena and said, "I do not want you or anyone here to be in danger because of me. I want to leave quietly, without causing trouble." Lena smiled gently. "You are kind," she said. "But you must understand that helping others is not trouble. It is what we do. We have helped many people before. We will continue to help."
"We will not stop because of fear."
Mara felt tears in her eyes. She did not want to cry in front of the others, but she could not stop herself. She felt a deep respect for Lena. She realized that there were people who were willing to help, even when it was risky. She had thought she was alone in the world, but she was not. That night, they began their journey. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly. The world felt calm, but Mara knew that the calm could end at any moment. She walked with her sisters, and Lena walked beside them. Other people from the house also joined, helping to guide them. The first part of the journey was the hardest. They had to walk through fields and forests, staying away from roads and villages. The ground was uneven, and their feet grew tired quickly. Mara's wrist still hurt, but she did not let it slow her down. She kept her head up and kept moving. As they walked, Mara noticed that her sisters were starting to talk again. At first, their voices were quiet, like they were afraid of being heard. But as the hours passed, they began to speak more openly. They talked about their memories, their dreams, and the things they wanted to do when they were safe. Mara listened and smiled. She felt a small happiness in her heart. The journey also gave Mara time to think. She thought about the man who had cut her wrist. She wondered if he was still looking for her. She wondered if he would ever stop. She wondered if he would ever feel regret. Mara realized that she did not want to hate him. She did not want to carry anger in her heart. She wanted to be free from fear. She wanted to live a life where she could smile without thinking about danger. But she also knew that she could not forget. She could not forget what had happened. The memory was a part of her now. It was a part of her strength. They walked for hours, and the night began to change. The sky started to lighten, and the sun began to rise. Mara and her sisters stopped to rest for a few minutes. They sat under a tree and ate a small amount of food that Lena had brought. Mara looked at the sunrise and felt a small sense of hope. The world was still turning. Life was still moving forward. After a short rest, they continued their journey. They walked through a small forest, and Mara noticed that the trees were tall and old. The forest felt peaceful. It felt like a place where time moves slowly. Mara felt calm for a moment, but she knew she had to stay alert. Suddenly, Lena stopped. She held up her hand, signaling for everyone to stop. Mara's heart began to beat faster. She looked around, trying to see what Lena had noticed. Lena pointed to a small path leading deeper into the forest. She whispered, "This is the safe path. The scouts do not usually come here." Mara felt a wave of relief. She followed Lena down the path, and the group moved quietly. The path was narrow and covered with leaves. It felt like the forest was holding them gently, like it was protecting them. They walked for a long time, and the forest began to open into a small clearing. In the clearing, Mara saw the cart that Lena had spoken about. It was hidden behind a hill, covered with cloth and branches. Mara felt a small smile on her face. They had reached the next part of their journey. Lena approached the cart and lifted the cloth. Inside there were blankets, food, and water. There was also a small space where people could sit. The cart was not big, but it was enough for them. Mara felt grateful for the friend who had left it there. She realized that there were people who cared about them, even if they did not know them. Lena said, "We will rest here for a while. Then we will continue. The cart will take us faster, but we must be careful." Mara and her sisters sat down inside the cart. They felt the soft blankets under them. Mara closed her eyes for a moment and felt the exhaustion wash over her. She thought about how far they had come. She thought about how they had escaped the building and how they had found help. She felt a sense of pride. She had done something brave. As they rested, Mara heard a sound in the distance. It was faint, but it sounded like voices. She sat up and listened carefully. The voices were getting closer. Mara's heart began to race. She looked at Lena, and Lena's face became serious. Lena whispered, "We must move now. Stay quiet." The group quickly prepared to leave. The cart began to move slowly, and the people inside held their breath. Mara could feel the cart bumping over the uneven ground. The sound of the wheels was loud in the quiet forest. Mara looked out and saw the trees moving past. She wondered if the voices were the scouts. She hoped not. She hoped that they had not been found. They continued moving, and the voices in the distance grew quieter. Mara felt a small wave of relief. She looked at her sisters and saw that they were holding hands. They looked tired, but they were safe for now. Mara knew that the journey was not over. There would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew that they were not alone. They had people who cared for them, and they had each other. She felt a new sense of hope. As the day passed, the cart carried them further away from the danger. Mara looked at the sky and saw the sun high above. She felt the warmth on her face. She realized that the world was still full of light, even after the darkness they had experienced. Mara closed her eyes and whispered a quiet promise to herself. She promised that she would keep her sisters safe. She promised that she would never forget what had happened, but she would not let it destroy her. She promised that she would build a new life, one step at a time. And with that promise, Mara felt a small peace in her heart. She knew that the journey was still long, but she also knew that she was not alone. She was surrounded by people who cared, and she had her sisters by her side. The cart moved slowly, carrying Mara and her sisters farther away from the place they had escaped. The trees around them began to thin, and the air felt warmer. The world looked different now, as if the journey had changed everything. Mara felt both relief and worry at the same time. She knew they were closer to safety, but she also knew that the scouts could still be looking for them. Mara looked at her sisters. They were sitting close together, their hands still linked. Their faces looked calmer than they had been in days. Their eyes were not as wide with fear. Mara felt a deep sense of comfort. She realized that she had done something important. She had kept her promise to them. She had brought them this far, but Mara also knew that the journey was not over. She could not relax yet. She had to stay alert. She had to keep her sisters safe until they were truly home. The cart continued to move, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Mara felt the heat on her skin. She took a deep breath and tried to enjoy the small moments of peace. She looked at the landscape passing by. There were fields of green, small houses, and people working. It looked like a normal world, a world where people lived without fear. Mara wondered how many people in this world knew what was happening to others. She wondered how many people had heard the stories about the scouts and still chose to ignore them. She thought about the people who had stayed silent in her town. She understood why they did not speak up, but she also wished they had been braver. Mara's thoughts were interrupted when Lena spoke softly.
"We will reach a safe place soon," she said, "but we must be careful."
"The last part of the journey is the hardest." Mara nodded. She knew that Lena was right. The scouts might still be watching. They might still be looking for them. The journey was not just about distance, it was about staying hidden, staying quiet, and staying strong. As the day passed, the cart moved through different landscapes. They passed small rivers, crossed hills, and walked through patches of forest. Mara felt tired, but she did not want to show it. She wanted her sisters to feel safe. She wanted them to believe that they were almost home. In the evening, the cart stopped near a small village. The village looked peaceful, with lights glowing in the windows and people talking softly outside. Mara felt a small hope rise in her chest. She wondered if this could be the place where they would finally feel safe. Lena guided them to a small house on the edge of the village. The house looked simple, but it had a warm feeling. A woman stood at the door and welcomed them. She looked kind and calm, and her eyes showed understanding. "This is the place," Lena said. "You can rest here. You will be safe." Mara felt a wave of relief. She looked at her sisters and saw that they were smiling. Their smiles were small, but they were real. Mara felt tears in her eyes. She had not expected to feel this emotional. She had been so focused on survival that she had forgotten what it felt like to feel safe. The woman inside the house offered them food and water. The sisters ate slowly, enjoying the taste of real food. Mara felt her body relax. She could feel the tension leaving her muscles. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. After they ate, a woman asked Mara to sit with her. She said, "I want to know your story. I want to know what happened to you." Mara hesitated. She did not want to relive the fear. She did not want to talk about the pain. But she also knew that telling her story could help her heal. It could also help others understand what was happening. So Mara began to speak. She told the woman about the scouts, about the fear that had followed them, and about the day the man had come to their home. She told her about the cut on her wrist and the promise she had made to save her sisters. She told her about the escape and the journey. The woman listened quietly. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed sadness. When Mara finished, the woman said, "You are very brave."
You have done something that many people would not have done. You have saved your sisters.
Mara felt a small smile. She felt proud, but she also felt tired. She realized that the journey had changed her. She was not the same person she had been before. "I've got up and omened. I've got up and omened." She had grown stronger. She had learned what it meant to be brave. That night, Mara and her sisters slept in a warm room. The bed was soft, and the blankets were thick. Mara felt the comfort of the bed and the safety of the house. She closed her eyes and thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the man's face. She thought about the cut on her wrist. She thought about the moment she had chosen to risk everything for her sisters. Mara wondered if the man would ever forget her. She wondered if he would ever think about what he had done. She wondered if he would ever feel sorry. Mara realized that she did not want to hate him. She did not want to live with anger. She wanted to live with peace. She wanted to move forward. As the night passed, Mara dreamed of a future where she and her sisters could live freely. She dreamed of a small house with a garden, where they could grow food and live quietly. She dreamed of a life where they could laugh without fear. She dreamed of a world where people helped each other. In the morning, Mara woke up to the sound of birds singing outside. The sun was shining, and the world looked bright. Mara felt a sense of hope. She looked at her sisters and saw that they were also smiling. The fear in their eyes had begun to fade. Mara knew that they still had work to do. They still needed to find a way to build a new life. But she also knew that they were safe for now. She knew that they had survived. She knew that they had won. Mara stood by the window and looked outside. She saw children playing in the street and people talking with each other. She realized that life could be normal again. She realized that she had been given a second chance. Mara took a deep breath and whispered, "We are free." Her sisters heard her and smiled. They walked to her and hugged her. They held each other tightly, as if they were making sure that the moment was real. Mara felt the warmth of their embrace, and she felt the love that had kept them alive. Mara knew that she would never forget what had happened. She knew that the memory would always be a part of her, but she also knew that she would not let it control her life. She would use her experience to be stronger. She would use her experience to help others. She would use her experience to make sure that her sisters would never have to feel that kind of fear again. Mara looked at her sisters and smiled. She knew that their journey was not over, but it was now a new beginning. She knew that they would face challenges, but they would face them together. And as they stepped out into the bright morning, Mara felt a sense of peace. She felt like the world was finally giving them a chance to live.